Hi, and welcome back to Madonna's Lounge. This is Madonna Night, where we discuss everything union. So today we're going to talk about how do you go about choosing a shop steward, right? So we know that a shop steward is someone that is elected and or appointed by number one, the members who would elect this individual, or two, they can be appointed by the president of that particular local. So let's look at overall what would determine a shop steward. So how stewards are chosen is determined by union bylaws and constitutional provisions. These provisions can be enforced and as contracts by unions and union members. The NLRA prohibits employers from attempting to influence the selection of stewards. Another federal law, the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act, which is LMRDA, popularly known as the Lumbra-Griffin Act, also has a bearing on choosing stewards. Now, the question may ask, must stewards be elected? Well, as I began this session, I talked that there were two ways that stewards can be placed in a union shop. So let's look. One question commonly asked is whether stewards must be elected by the employees they represent. The answer, according to the nation's labor laws, is no. Although the Lambert-Griffin Act requires constitutional officers to be elected, stewards are not officers. Under most union bylaws, stewards are elected by a department or shift. But in great many unions, stewards are appointed by the union president or business agent. Appointing stewards is lawful. So you may hear in some unions that there is a shop steward who is appointed by a president. And usually, why a steward is appointed by a president is because that president may have requested people to run for stewardship, and they've asked people to run for stewardship, and no one wants to run for stewardship. Members don't, step up and volunteer to run for stewardship. So oftentimes, presidents will choose those individuals that they see that are active in the union and appoint them for whatever term that they are serving. In other cases, you do have members who are very vocal, very interested in helping their colleagues, and they are interested in being the steward, right? They're going to take the lead in making sure that members understand their rights, represent their members, and there may be several people within that shop that also want to be the steward. At that point, there can be an election. An election will then take place, members will vote their choice, and typically before members vote, a general membership meeting is required, or a meeting, for each party to express themselves as to why they want to be a steward, why do they want to represent their colleagues. Typically, members will choose that individual who they know is actually, interested in them and their needs and what's going on at the workplace. And there are times when you may have more than one store at a location. For example, you may have a location that runs 24/7 and you have a night shift, right? And oftentimes a steward is needed there. There's no one there to represent the members. So you may have several stewards in one location. You may have one during a 9 to 5, a 5 to 11, an 11 to 6, etc. But the membership can vote in a steward. So let's look at what some of the qualifications can be and really should be considered when someone is qualifying for a stewardship. So qualifications for stewards are usually set out in the union bylaws and constitutions. The only restrictions imposed by federal law concern persons who have been convicted of serious crimes. Now, in most cases, agencies do not hire people who are convicted of serious crimes unless they are part of a program. Uh, However, if you're talking about low level crimes and someone is working, then yes, those individuals can run for a position if in fact they are qualified and members feel confident that they would do a good job. So, Section 504 of the Lombard-Griffin Act bars persons, right, who were committed of serious crimes. So that's pretty much what we need to know about anyone who's committed a crime being part of it. Certainly, I want you to look up this if you're really, really interested and see what that law says further. Let's look at removal of an officer. Sometimes members do get upset when either someone is appointed, and typically someone who's appointed, that person can be removed by the president because the president is the one that appointed them. If in fact the president finds that that individual is not doing their duties, they're not doing due diligence, and they're just there by name, right? So you always want to have someone who is really supportive of their union brothers and sisters, and they really want to do a job. So yes, a president can remove an appointed shop steward. On the other hand, shop stewards who are elected, it is more difficult for them to be removed from office. Uh, Unions can remove stores from office, right? Subject to procedures in the union's bylaws and constitution. If all fails, right? No, let me stop for a second. If all fails in terms of their duties and they're taken out for wrongdoing, then all of that is illegal. The ability to remove stewards for political reasons, however, depends on whether the steward is appointed or elected. So there was a case in 1982 in the Supreme Court that actually gave unions the right to remove appointed officials uh, for political reasons. And the name of the case is called Finnegan versus Liu. And I want you to look that up if you're interested as well, but it speaks to the fact that the ability of an elected union president to select his own administration is an integral part of ensuring a union administration's responsiveness to the mandate of union election. However, the court noted that if the purpose of the dismissal was to suppress dissent within the union, it would violate Section 401 of the Lombard-Griffin Act, which protects union members, right? It protects union members for free speech. So someone can express themselves in terms of they don't like the leadership, the leadership is not doing enough, etc. They cannot be removed for expressing themselves that way. Now, in some unions, it can become very political, where if someone is a steward and find that the president, him or herself, not doing an adequate job on behalf of the members, when that term is up, sometimes people get other people to run against that particular person. So as a steward, you have to know where your foot lay in terms of what it is you have to back up what it is you're saying, and make sure that you are serving the members. Because that being said, even if an official may put someone up against you to run against you as a steward who's doing a good job, members know exactly who is doing what. So typically a person will be re-elected for that position over and over. There may be a term, it may be 4 terms that person can run for shop steward, and you know, but at the end of the day, it's the members who are in control and should be. Um, so again, you got to make sure that you follow the rules. So here are some questions, and answers. And when I say make sure you follow the rules, again, there are Robert's rules, there are all kinds of laws that support what unions are about and what they're entitled to and what they're not. They are questions, right? And they're also answers when it comes to election procedures. So here's a question. If a union elects stewards, must it follow the rules regarding nominations, secret ballots, and voting found in the Lombard-Griffith Act? The answer would be no. Lombard-Griffith rules apply only to elections of constitutional officers, right? Remember before we said stewards are not officers. So those rules do not apply to them. Because stewards are not officers, the only election procedure that must be adhered to are those in the union's bylaws and constitutions. So you may say, what are bylaws and what are constitutions? We are going to discuss that at a later podcast. So yes, since they're not officers, they they do not have to adhere to those rules that the Lombard-Griffith Act has in place for officers when they are running for a position. The only thing that they have to adhere to is the Constitution of what their duties are in terms of what the Constitution says for each officer, and then also they will say for stewards what is expected. And in some unions as well, there are things such as bylaws, which we will discuss later. We already talked about the criminal conviction, that if one is, you know, arrested for a serious crime, that individual will not be and should not be elected unless, in fact, they have been there for some time. And again, it depends on what the crime is, right? So we want to make sure that we are fair to everyone. If you're arrested for driving drunk, that does not mean that you cannot hold a position. So let's go to the next question. Must union stewards be bonded? Well, what does that mean? We'll get back to that. But the answer would be no. Under federal law, bonding is required only for union officers who handle funds and other union property. So in that answer I just gave you, you can see a steward is not dealing with any funds at all, meaning dues, meaning per capita money, all of that type of stuff. Stewards do not do that. Property, stewards do not do that. You have officers who are elected. They are responsible for some of those things in terms of the local's budget, monies, what is done with the money. In many locals, most locals actually, there are expenditures, right? So you have a president, you have a vice president, you have a treasurer, you have a secretary. So we're going to go through the layout of many locals so you can see what their roles are, and you can get a good idea. And again, I'm spelling this out because I'm hoping that when you do hear this podcast, this would inspire you to become a steward and or encourage others to become a steward as well. So again, they don't have to be bonded. Construction, right? Construction of union steward, right? Our union has a hiring hall arrangement under which we refer carpenters to contractors based on their rank on an out of work list. Can we deviate from the list in order to refer a particular employee to be the steward for a job? Yes, the answer is yes, you can. The NLRB recognizes the right of a union to select in good faith whomever it considers to be the best choice to serve as a steward, even if this requires deviating from the normal order of a referred list. Now here's the thing, you can have people who were working and they're still paying their dues. The hours might have been cut. However, they are still an active member. Once they're paying their dues, they come to the meetings, they attend everything that needs to be attended to, and members can choose among their rank and file who they want to be a steward. Refusal to hire a steward. Well, typically a steward is not hired, right? A steward is either appointed or elected. But let's look at what this says. Can an employer refuse to hire a steward, and which is an individual, obviously, to hire an individual referred by a union because he or she has designated as the union steward? No, employer cannot refuse to hire someone because they are a steward. Again, that goes back to the law. The law says clearly that employers cannot get involved in and or influencing any selection in terms of someone being a steward. Therefore, if a union shop sends someone to an agency who has openings for hire, that should not prohibit that person from getting a job. Okay? Conditioning reinstatement or resignation from steward posts. Okay, here's a question. A steward was discharged for drinking at lunch, returning to work late, and threatening a foreman. At the grievance hearing, the company said the steward could return to work, but as an employee only and not as a steward. Isn't this illegal? Well, let's see what the NLRB says. Probably yes. The NLRB long held that an employer violates the NLRA by conditioning an employee's reinstatement on his or her agreeing not to hold union office. In 1992, however, the board relaxed its rule by sanctioning a last chance agreement. The last chance agreement is used a lot in the workplace for people who are in some type of crisis, whether they're drinking, they have an absenteeism problem, and they would have gone through what is called progressive discipline. They've been warned, they've had informal meetings, they've had formal meetings, they've had counseling, and it's gotten to the point where the employer is like at their last chance. So last chance agreements gives the person an opportunity to get their act together, and that in fact would be their last chance. If in fact they violate that last chance agreement, most of the times in that agreement it is written that if you do violate it, you will be terminated. There will be no grievance, there will be no hearings. You will be terminated, and that is typically legal. Okay? So let's go back to what the board says, NLRB, NLRA. The board said that because the five had shown contempt for the collective bargaining agreement, the employer could seek an agreement in which the employees relinquish their rights to hold union office. The steward's conduct in the case, however, does not appear to rise to the level of contempt. That will allow an employer to insist on giving up union office rights. Okay, so the law becomes very, very ticklish in a sense, where you can get a last chance agreement, and also the fact that the person may not hold office. But typically when these things happen, the union tries to grieve the issue. The union tries to get the employee help, whether it's through counseling or whatever other resources that is there, and would ask the person to step down for some time until they get their act together. So these are things that we need to keep in mind when we are considering someone for a stewardship, and truly someone being a steward, not only to be likable, but someone who really cares, someone who really um, wants to help out. So we'll take a break now and be right back.